All right.
All right. This is Wednesday, July the 10th, I believe. Yeah, July the 10th. Wednesday, July the 10th, 2024. This is the monthly meeting of the St. Louis Linux Unix Users Group, SLUUG, and it's almost always on the second Wednesday of the month, which is where we are today. It's a meeting that's divided like an Oreo cookie. We've got the announcements in the middle, but the first part of our meeting tonight is a basic tutorial, which is organized by Grant, and he's going to talk to us. Kind of, this is the third of the series we've had on use of remote tools. So he's going to tell us what goodies we might be using here later tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Grant.
All right. Suppose I should share my screen. There is something resembling a slide deck. Okay. Come on.
Oh boy.
Can you see my screen?
Couple more
Yes.
bumps would be good.
Okay. And
All I see is black.
do I need to stop?
Here comes some.
Okay. Should be multi-tone gray background. 7 tabs.
That's what I have.
Yeah, looks like it.
Okay. All right. So the previous 2 months, we've done some information on how to do network sniffing and how to do it remotely. And last month, we said we're going to do something that is against security best practices and just simpler to get started. Here is what I hope is a quick interlude on how to do things with better security and a more convenient way of doing it. So, obligatory intro slide. We go to SSH. Are you seeing the black bar right below the top paragraph, or is that just my display?
I think that's just your display.
Okay. So reminder on how to create SSH keys and install them and use them. I'm going to assume that most people know how to do that, or if not, here is enough stub on how to do it, and feel free to reach out to me or just about anybody else that has done it. But I did split this out into variables to make things a little simpler. You run SSH keygen, you tell it the number of bits. I like to add comments. That helps when you're on servers and you have a whole bunch of different keys for various different things. You can store keys in separate files to make it simpler, and the type. So those are set up above. Here is a generation I did specifically for this. And yes, I know I'm going fast because this is not the crux of this presentation. Then similarly, you can use SSH copy ID to conveniently push the key to the target system as the target user, again, with the reusing some variables and setting some new ones. Then down at the bottom, depending if you have it in your config or not, you SSH with the key as the user you want to the target system, and ideally you're logged in and dropped at a prompt with no interaction, presuming the key is available and or loaded in an agent. Any questions? Okay. The crux of what I want to present this evening is how to utilize PAM, as in pluggable authentication module, to authenticate to sudo and su using the keys we just created and installed. As Lee asked, PAM, or pluggable authentication module, is a framework that exists in just about every Linux. There are some stalwarts that don't have it. Solaris does. I think multiple BSDs do, but probably not all of them. The idea being it's a framework that programs use and outsource authentication to. The advantage being, if you want to add a new type of authentication, Kerberos if it was the 90s, or tonight you want to add SSH key authentication, you put a module on the system and you tell programs to use it. You don't have to have program source code. You don't have to recompile or relink. It's you plug it into the framework called PAM, tweak some configs, and you're using your new authentication. So to do that, install on Debian-based systems, apt-get or apt-pick your package manager, PAM ssh-agent auth. That does the install. I already had it installed on my sample system. It's pretty simple, should be in all distros of any contemporary system. Do take 3 minutes and skim the configuration section of the man page for PAM ssh-agent auth. It's like 12 lines. It has a lot of good information. It's an easy read. You probably would have read it the time I'm talking about it. So please do. It behooves you.
Is Lee?
Hey, Lee. Okay. PAM ssh-agent auth does depend on being able to communicate with an SSH agent. I accomplish that by forwarding my local agent when I log into trusted servers. Security best practices don't forward your agent to untrusted servers, but I trust Bach. So I forward my agent to Bach when I log into it, or likewise with my personal servers. Any questions?
Yeah, what does that do forwarding your agent? Are you going to get to that or?
I was not planning on it, but sure. The agent runs in memory wherever you have the agent running, and it loads your SSH keys into memory. And this is important, like if you have a passphrase protected key, rather than being prompted for the passphrase every time you want to use it, you're prompted one time when you load it into the agent, and then SSH or anything else that utilizes the SSH agent can have access to that key in memory. And the way the agent works is a client asks the agent to sign something. So the key does not leave the agent. The agent does work on behalf of the person requesting, or the program requesting, the authentication. So when you start an agent, and if you just do SSH agent on a system, you'll see some output and it'll start an agent in the background, and it outputs some environment variables. Usually they're set through an eval, but just take a look and you can export some variables. And then anything that wants to can look at that. It's a Unix socket, can talk to it and ask the agent to list the public IDs it has keys for. And you can ask the agent, please sign this blob with key identifier blah. And it does so when you pass it back to whatever remote you're trying to authenticate to. So it keeps the privacy and the secrecy of the key within the agent, and it streamlines things and makes it simpler to use with enhanced security. That help?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused on why you would forward your agent, because like I understand using an agent like on my local system, because then if I'm like I think with some Git commands and stuff, like you have to type it in all the time, your password. So using an agent kind of stops you there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really, I mean, I guess the same thing on a remote system is why you would do it.
Yes. So what I do is I load my multiple keys into my agent on my local workstation. My public servers do not have my private key. They only have the public key. So when I log into my public server with agent forwarding, I can then SSH from server 1 to server 2, authenticating with the agent that is on my local workstation. And that's because when I forward the agent from my workstation to server 1, it creates a Unix socket that gets forwarded back through SSH like a remote port forward back to the local agent socket. So when I run SSH on server 1 to go to server 2, it has access to an agent socket that is not physically in the memory space on server 1. It's actually talking to the agent on my workstation. So the private key is only on my local workstation. Or, as part of tonight's entertainment, is I can SSH to server 1 with agent forwarding, and then using what we'll get to, I can authenticate to sudo using that agent and keys loaded therein. Or I can do similar with SU. So I have stronger authentication. It's however many bit, 2048, I think is what the sample key was. Cryptographic number used to authenticate me instead of my measly 25 character password. So I have stronger authentication. I'm not stopped and prompted for a password. It is a transparent operation for me, and that is enabled with the agent forwarding. Make sense?
Yeah, it's cool. I when I used it locally, I thought it was weird, like, oh, this is a socket. Like I have a socket going for this, but I guess that makes sense for this use case where you port forward or whatever to that socket through multiple machines. That I guess that's why it's a socket. Because I was thinking, is the socket really the best way for this on my local machine? But yeah, it makes sense when you talk about forwarding and stuff. So that's cool.
Yeah, and the Unix sockets are inherently more secure than network ports in the fact that they are by themselves inherently local to the system. The only way to get to them remotely is, or via remote, is with something else proxying that access.
So you're saying that this is more secure than having a SSH key pair on the server 1 when you're to get to server 2.
Correct, because you have the private key used is located on server 1. I trust all the admins are going to do the best they can to secure the system, but unfortunately things happen. We won't go there. So there's a possibility that private key pair, half of the key pair, can be compromised and copied. With agent forwarding, the private key is nowhere on server 1. And there's no way to extract the public key, or I'm sorry, the private key from the agent. You can only ask the agent to sign something. And if I'm disconnected, that's not even accessible on server 1. Anything else? Okay, so PAM is an existing framework. We're adding another piece to that framework. Relatively simple. Then start with sudo, and I hope you can see that title. I see a black bar. As I was showing Lee, anytime you're modifying system critical files, make a backup. Either in the existing directory with a different name, but be mindful that certain places like etsy-sudors.d and a few other locations, there are file name constraints, as in certain file names are automatically included. So my recommendation is usually back up the file into your home directory, or if you're working as root, I like to copy the file with a date to root's home directory. Next pro tip is when you're modifying system critical files, things like sudo fail secure. So if you have a typo or somehow mess up the logic, it is going to lock you out. So you want to have another terminal, physical terminal or emulator or whatever, open and elevated privileges so you can back out your mistake. Been there, done that. But as long as you have that reserved terminal, it is pretty safe to do whatever you want in a second terminal. I normally recommend in that backup terminal be in a program that will not time you out. Either start a read, so it's waiting for you to provide data and hit enter, or go into your favorite editor that some people can never figure out how to escape, etc. But just make sure that safety window does not time you out and log you out.
I really like that idea. Nice.
When I was at IBM, we had that save our bacon multiple times. We had a team of junior admins making sudoers and or PAM changes, and invariably every change window somebody would oops something, be it an extra space or they were new to VI and didn't tell us. Things happen, so it's like, okay, go over to your other window, and are you comfortable backing out? Like, copy your backup file in place, or would you like somebody else to sit down at the keyboard and help you get out of the ditch? And I would encourage, depending what it was, I often wanted people to fix things themselves as a learning opportunity, but part of the time I had to pull them out of the ditch and then let them try again. So similarly, use the vi sudo command. If you prefer Emacs or Joe or something else, set the editor environment variable. Vi sudo respects that, and despite its name, it will happily allow you to use Emacs to edit the sudoers file. And as I have here, once you are done with your edit, vi sudo runs sanity checks on the temporary file and lets you know if there's a syntax problem to make it much harder for you to lock yourself out. Whereas if you just use your preferred editor, those syntax checks don't run. And if you don't have that terminal, you're gonna have to have somebody get on console. And if it's a system that has some current Linux mentality, there's no root password. You're rebooting from live media. And that really sucks if it's a production database server in an unmanned data center. So
Yeah. It's especially if it's in San Francisco.
yes. Sudo fails secure. If you screw up, it says, nope, something is wrong. I am not going to honor any of the config file. I'm going to sit here and pout. So with those pro tips and heads ups out of the way, what you need to do to turn on the new module we installed on the previous tab is you need to edit the etc pam.d sudo file and insert this line above the first authentication line. And I did this whole presentation with the intention of you would have these slides and could reference or ask for clarifying details. So I'm not walking through it. I believe Lee is going to do some of that in a bit. So once you have done that, and PAM is its own entire subsystem, kind of foreshadowing it's something on tab 6. Once you have that in place, you do need to add a line to sudoers to keep the SSH auth sock variable, and that points to the aforementioned Unix socket. And what'll happen is once sudo starts, it keeps that variable, and the PAM module reads that variable to look and talk to the socket and test your authenticate you using the keys that are in the in the agent via that socket path. So edit the sudoers file and append this line below the last defaults env keep line. If there's not one, you'll see some other defaults. You can just append it below the last of the defaults. In your terminal emulator, test to make sure that you can still sudo and that it didn't fail secure due to a typo or whatever. If it's not working and it has failed secure, go back to your safety net terminal and undo the changes you made. And you might, if this is new to you, You might want to, after you do the PAM piece, test sudo. It would prompt for a password still. And then after you do the defaults, test sudo again. And it should, barring the caching timeout, which you can clear, I'd have to look at the option, or wait 5 minutes or start another terminal. You should be able to sudo and it would take you straight to the prompt without prompting for a password. Because it uses the new PAM module you turned on to actually ask your SSH agent to sign something using your private key, and it can then cryptographically verify with the public key that is in your authorized key file. If you're crossing users, you need to add the source user's public key to the target user's file. For you logging into your account and going to sudo, that's not necessary. This comes more into play when you're trying to use SU. So, any questions before I go to SU? Hello, anybody?
So you're gonna take it, are you gonna take it the last step and scramble your password after you got this working? Because theoretically you shouldn't need it anymore, right?
No, I am a firm believer you always need to know what your password is, because you have things like too many mounts, or it's been too long since you've mounted a file system, it stops and wants to run a check, and you need a root password on boot. Your account has a password. I believe I prescribe to the belief system you should know that password. If you want to change it and record the change password, that's fine. And there's also times you may be logging in from a trusted friend system that does not have your key, and when you type sudo, you would need your password. So, nice idea. Not my cup of tea, Sean.
Yeah, so really we're not really limiting the surface area here for any type of attacks or anything. This is just like a convenience thing. Then I don't have to type your password when you're sudoing.
It's convenience, it enables some automation, and it makes things faster.
Yeah, so you unlock the agent on your machine, and then from there it can carry out tasks on your behalf. Is what you're thinking?
Yes.
So
I think I have a vague memory of seeing somewhere where they when you're putting your SSH password in, there's if someone's running a trace or something, maybe a P trace or something, they could see the password.
If somebody has root or root level authority on your box, they can probably.
Well, I guess it doesn't matter, yeah.
Right. About the only thing that stops them at that point is if a file is encrypted or an SSH.
So you're saying, yeah, it takes root level privileges to run a P trace or something?
I believe so, yes. Or access other memory, etc. Yes, there are some, in extreme cases, there are things to beat on, but there's always things in extreme cases to beat on.
Yeah, yeah. I think the point they're just making the point that it's, it's not like it's encrypted or anything when you put your password in or passphrase.
Well, when I created the key, I entered a passphrase, and that actually encrypts the private key in the key file. And that's why when you load it into an agent or use it without an agent, you have to provide that passphrase. It's actually decrypting it on the fly. When you load it into an agent, it is stored in the agent's memory unencrypted, so it can be used. Okay. Anything else? Okay. SU. It is almost identical to sudo. The only difference is you're adding the same line to the SU file. Same directions, just a different file. This is where you do need, so if I want to be able to SU from my gTaylor account to root or Oracle or pick your flavor, I would need to put my public key as the source user in the target user's authorized key file. So this same methodology can be used for SU and sudo and other things. Any questions? All right. So there are some books that I have read over the years that have helped with this process significantly. I first learned about PAM ssh-agent auth, a lot more other things, in the first edition of SSH Mastery. Second edition is out. It's probably a $15 to $25 book. There's physical book, there's electronic copies, and when we get to tab 7, I can make it a little bit cheaper. Sudo Mastery by the same author demystified PAM and what some of the auth is sufficient, the format of these lines, the ordering kind of helps all of that make more sense. So if you're curious and want to understand and not just follow rote memory, highly recommend actually PAM Mastery. Sudo Mastery is the same idea, but all about the sudoers file and how to use sudo and a bunch of other things. And all of these books that I'm recommending are from a name you might recognize from a talk not quite a year ago, Michael W. Lucas. DNSSEC Mastery. I practice what I preach. My zones are DNSSEC signed. TLS Mastery. If you've ever wanted to do some things with TLS, thought, how do I do this? And invariably things say use the OpenSSL command. TLS Mastery was an eye-opener for me. I can now predict what I'm going to want to do, what commands I need to do, and understand the commands that I see running to do various things. And after dealing with TLS for 15 to 20 years, TLS Mastery was an eye-opener, and I wish I had read it 10 years ago, but it didn't exist yet. Networking for system administrators. If I ever am in an office and have a junior admin working around me saying, I want to learn about networking, I will buy them a copy of Networking for System Administrators and gift it to them. It gives a lot of between 95 and 105 level introduction for things and briefly explains how to do things. It is a wonderful book. And then Michael's latest work, which I think is on pre-sale right now, Run Your Own Mail Server. Teach you how to do what it says on the cover. Been a postmaster for 20 years. I don't see eye to eye with Michael, but what he has put together in the book is viable and will help you end up with a functional mail server. And yes, my name is in some of these books. I got to read some of them before they were finished and point out his mistakes, some of which he replied, said, no, you're wrong, and say, sorry. Okay. Well, the marquee's not working. Dang it. So Tilted Windmill Press is Michael's website. That is a clickable link. It will be available. Well, the slide is on SLUUG's website. And when I decided I was going to give this presentation, I emailed Michael and said, hi, can I ask for a 1% discount? He's like, why do you want it? And I said, I'm going to be giving this presentation. He said, no, you can't have 1%. You have to have a 10% discount. So for this SLUUG meeting, there is good through the 16th, a discount, and I need to verify it and I'll share it with everybody. But I believe it's DRSCRIPTT with the DNS capitalized. It's Dr. Script. It's a nickname I've had for years. It is good for any regularly priced item on Michael's website. So if you're interested in any of those books, go buy them within the next week, use the code and get 10% off.
You want to put that code in the chat, Brent?
I will get it and put it there in a few minutes after I stop sharing. So,
Yeah, that way we can be sure and copy down accurately.
yep. Okay. I know that was a lot thrown out fast, and it was with the intention of this being in front of people and they could copy and paste and read and ask questions when they got there. Are there any other questions?
I believe there are a couple in the chat.
Somebody please share them with me because I can't see that right now.
Okay. Most recent is from Nick, and he says, can you please share the difference between strace and ptrace?
If I knew, I would. Can anybody else speak to that? And was that T as in Tom or D as in David trace?
S is in Sierra and P is in Papa.
Okay. I occasionally use S trace as in Sierra trace.
I might have just remembered it wrong. That's me that I put the note, the first one in there about. Thought it was ptrace and I might have just remembered it wrong. I don't know. Is there an actual ptrace? Maybe there's not.
No, there are many different utilities. I know the big two that I'm aware of is D as in David on Solaris and BSD systems, and it is very detailed. Gets in and looks at things one manner and gets a lot of information. strace, as in Sierra, is I first ran into it on Linux, and it does similar, but it is a fundamentally different method. And it was created on Linux before dtrace was an option. If dtrace is an option on Linux, it's kind of used for the same thing, and it's I think the environment you're in and when it landed there.
Just a quick search on the web is it's showing ptrace is the actual system call that the kernel uses, and strace is a utility. So
Okay, that makes sense. And it's much lower level than I normally get. When I'm stracing, it's like, okay, why is this program dying and not doing anything? And hey, why is it trying to read a file that doesn't exist and then erroring out after that? What is that file? Maybe I should put it there. I am not a programmer. I'm not a web developer either. I can't even make Marquee work reliably. I think there was at least one other question in the chat.
I think the other questions were variations of this ptrace strace thing. And then before that, it was a question about, which I think was in reference to the Nextcloud conversation that's trying to be put together. So
Gotcha.
that's all resolved.
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions in the chat or on the call, I think I'm going to stop sharing and have some gooey cookie center.
All righty. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Grant.
You're welcome.
Really informative. Loved it. So once again, this is Wednesday, the 10th of July, 2024. It is the monthly general meeting of SLUUG, St. Louis Linux Unix Users Group. It's a group that's organized for open software, open standards, open source, and so we try and aim in that direction. This group overall right now is running 4 different meetings during the month that are kind of for general users. And as Grant said, this is our GUI middle of the meeting where we do announcements and a quick set of questions. I'm kind of jumping through this because I was looking at the people who are on with us right now. And I really don't see anybody who's a newbie tonight. Don't mean to use that term disparagingly. We love newbies. But I think everybody here has been to our meetings before and so kind of knows the lay of the land. I am going to kind of go over it just a little bit in case somebody's picking this up on the archive recording. The way to get into SLUUG is if you show up for 2 meetings in the course of a calendar year, you're a voting member. So there's no dues. We're just happy to have people to get part of our discussions, and their questions or their answers may contribute. So please do join us. As I said, it's kind of open source or open standards, I guess I should say. So a lot of it winds up concentrating on Linux, on TCP/IP software. Of course, we occasionally branch off into things that are proprietary as they affect the open standards world. So let's see. I can't remember a whole lot on the calendar. Lee's kind of glancing at that. He may have a comment here in a second. The only thing I will mention is next week on Thursday is one of our other meetings that we host every month. It's the St. Louis LUUG, St. Louis Linux Users Group. And next week, the speaker is Craig Buchek. And hopefully you all recognize that name. Craig was a long-time member of the group. He moved out of St. Louis and out to Silicon Valley. And he probably hasn't spoken to us in over a year, I think. But he's going to give a talk on Thursday. So you all might want to hear it. It sounds like a good philosophical title. It's architecture and building architecture and computer architecture. And basically, he's going to look back from a philosophical standpoint of how we develop software, hardware architecture for computers, kind of based on how buildings are put together. So it sounds like kind of an interesting, like say, philosophical discussion. So come next Thursday and join us for that. With that, Lee, did you see anything interesting in the calendar?
Well, we've got the new Linux group here on the 23rd, and then on the 1st, the Slack meeting, which are the other two groups that we keep running. Stan's fond of saying the new Linux group, whoever has the least experience gets to ask the first question.
Yep.
I thought they had to answer the questions.
And then the Slack club is typically more hardware oriented, although it just tends to end up being a great discussion nowadays since we're not having any more physical meetings. Although they have that new library branch open now in Lindbergh, I wonder if we could ever get a meeting room down there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Did you skip the 18th?
Let's see, the 18th.
Yeah, that's the log. That's Craig. We don't have his topic here on the calendar.
Okay.
Let's see, it is out on Meetup already, and it's my failure for not putting it onto the calendar yet. As I said, it's how computer architecture is similar to building architecture.
I have actually, the exact title is Architectures Big and Small. A look at how software patterns came from patterns in building architectures and what we can learn.
And I will get that out onto the calendar tomorrow.
A lot of folks, he hasn't been around too much since he moved out west, before the pandemic, I guess it was 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But he's always been heads down coder, and he used to do a lot of Ruby stuff, Ruby on Rails, and a lot of other stuff, or a lot of other technical sides, but he's always been a pretty philosophical software designer / thinker.
Yeah.
So it should be a good presentation. And what else do we have on here? Linux group. Okay. Well, barring anything interesting.
Usually we offer a chance to do some Q&A. Just if you got an odd question not related to tonight's topics that you just wanted to bring up. There'll also be time probably after the main presentation, but sometimes because people figure they can't stay very late or they want to try the early crowd here. Anybody have any general question they'd like to throw out to the group, or just a comment on, hey, I was working on this week and this worked?
Yeah, I have a question. So, and I'm going to share my screen. I have a question. So I've been working on this website, the new website that I hope will be the new website for SLUUG. And there's a couple source code repositories. And I was wondering what license I should put these source code repositories with. And I'm not like a big expert on open source licenses or anything like that. I know, obviously we want it to be open source, but I don't know if there's a certain license I should pick for some of this stuff, if we have an idea on that. But basically this repository right here, the SLUUG STLUG site, that's for this web page. So it houses all of like the meeting data and these images and all like the code that makes this website. And so I don't know what licenses websites are usually put under. Does anybody have an idea for that?
Not sure, Sean. Anybody have any ideas?
Guy we were just mentioning, Craig, I'm sure he would have an idea. Lee was saying he frequently had his nose in that stuff. So
I would think Scott Granman would be a good resource for that.
Yeah, I'd ask on the discuss mailing list, wider audience than people here tonight, and I'm sure Scott would have some input.
yeah.
Alrighty, I'll give that a shot. But I think, as you can see, the website, I think it's coming along pretty good. I have this meeting posted. I even have so this banner here only shows up if the meeting is in the future or the next day. So basically up until the meeting day and the next day is when this banner will show up, and it links to the connection information on SLUUG right now. And I think it's coming along pretty good. I have all of the 2021 data loaded in here. And so if you click on any of these meetings, it takes you to the page where it has the YouTube video, the title, the abstract, the presenter, and then some other AI generated content like these tweets. It also links to the meetup page. And like some people, like I don't know, Lee, I mean, if you go to his presenter page, you'll see, and this is just in 2021, look at all these. I feel like this is like half the meetings in 2021 Lee was giving talks at. So I think by the time I get 2022 and 3 and 4 in here, Lee is going to have this thing scrolling for a mile with all the different presentations he's been a part of. So
Where are you putting the data? Where you're storing it? How's it?
yeah, so the data is actually JSON files. So if we go in here to, let's look at the one for tonight. That might be the most interesting. So, sorry.
You're getting this from Stan? You're getting the data from Stan, or?
Yeah, they posted this stuff on the SteerCom mailing list for me. And so I was able to get the title, the abstract, and the presenter names from SteerCom. And then I came up with these references. So if they're, not right, that's on me, whatever. And then the AI comes up with the tags. Sometimes I tweak them. The AI comes up with the tweets. The AI comes up with the YouTube title and the image and the alt description for the image. And I realize this is too small to read, but it's not really, the details aren't super important here. But
Take a look at it.
But yeah, so every meeting is just a JSON file like this. And so, I was able to do I loaded one meeting during Grant's presentation. So I was a little bit distracted, but yeah, it probably took me like 20 minutes to do one meeting kind of thing. So it's going to take a while to go through all of 2022 and all of 2023 and all of 2024, but I'll get it done eventually and get them all loaded. Of course, if anybody wants to help load these meetings or convert the data over, that'd be super helpful. Or we could use a lot of other help in other ways too. So if anybody wants to lend a hand, we're getting pretty close now to the point where we're going to need some like system administration stuff, like how do we deploy this thing? Where do we put it on Bach? How do we put it alongside some pieces of the current site, right? Because if you think about it, this right here, this links to SLUUG.org, or well, that one I clicked on links to stllinux.org, right? But if we go back to the one for tonight, when I click on this link, it's going to link to, SLUUG.org, right? But if we're saying we're going to replace SLUUG.org with this new site, well, how's that going to work? You know what I mean? How are we going to have this, like these links still exist and coincide alongside of the new site? You know what I mean? And it's not an impossible problem by any stretch of the imagination, but it is going to take some like sysadmin type skills and stuff like that, Apache configs and whatnot, to kind of get all that stuff hammered out. And so if anybody would like to help, volunteer, glad to have it. Or if anybody's interested in getting involved with web dev, there's still bugs. Like I just found out that clicking these links down here doesn't work. So I need to fix these pagination links down here. Anyway, it does look pretty decent in the mobile view as well. Not too bad. So yeah, that's it. I guess I'll stop there. I guess I'll try asking again next week for the license thing. I might just do MIT just because that seems like the most easiest, like, slap MIT on it, call it a day. But I might ask during the next meeting as well, just to see.
A question and a comment. The question is it clear to everyone what the working example website is there? How somebody, if they want to go out and take a look? I mean, SLUUG.org goes to the old website.
I think it's right now it's on something Sean has that is not in really any way associated with SLUUG. One of the things that he and I have been discussing via email is standing up, I think I mockingly said like ST 2024 SLUUG beta.slug.org, just stand up another site, virtual host on Apache, and put some things on Bach and actually start testing some things there. We're getting to the point we're running into some cross-origin and the likes security policies with some of the testing he's doing, hosting where he's at. So we're kind of pushing the bounds and need to grow to putting something on a SLUUG site. And even if that means create a new virtual host.
Okay.
I am happy to help do that. I've been doing it on Apache for decades, but certainly want to discuss with sysadmins what is desired and consensus and move forward.
Okay. All right. Let's see, the comment was the heading at the top of the page. I believe the way it read was St. Louis Linux Unix. No, St. Louis Linux Unix user group. Is that what it says? Yeah, switch it together.
Yeah. So what I've been doing, and I think I did this on the YouTube channel as well, is St. Louis Unix/Linux user groups. And the reason why I like this is because I think it's important for us to maintain the SLUUG, because that's kind of what we call ourselves, as SLUUG. I hear our members saying that a lot.
Yep.
And so I wanted to kind of maintain that if possible. And sometimes people ignore these kind of slash things like this when they're doing an acronym. And so I realize it's kind of a hack, but I really feel like we need Linux in there for like SEO, for search engine optimization, so people can find us.
Yeah. I guess I was using the reverse of that. I've been saying St. Louis Linux Unix users group, figuring that conceptually we could just drop the L for the Louis in the city name, and that would put the UU together and make the SLUUG acronym. But maybe I'm viewing that wrong then. Okay.
SL2UUG.
SL.
One of the things I had suggested to Sean was some of the graphic editing, SL, and then the U and L, how they're kind of opposite sides of the slash, kind of superimpose them like a U upper left and the L lower right with the slash in between. Some of the things we were talking about with the graphics, so a common graphic could apply to both groups. And that's just, we're kind of spitballing back and forth. What do we think? Oh, that stinks. Hey, what about this? I like it a whole lot better than the thing that stinks type thing.
Yeah.
So very.
The way you've got it up there now is kind of the way I've been conceptualizing it. Just neglect to capitalize the L in Lewis, and that way it just. I mean, you could leave it there like that, like you have it right now. S small t small L, and so that gives us the SLUUG acronym.
Yeah, and STL is a standard abbreviation for St. Louis too.
Yeah.
Sean, one thing that just struck me when you showed the mobile view, I don't know if there's a way to shrink the pictures when you go mobile, because they take up like half the page. Or, it seems like and they're obviously AI generated. It just seems like we're placing too much importance on the pictures in the mobile view. Is there any way to shrink them, for the mobile view, or would you have to do them on both?
No, they're completely separate. So I can change the mobile view however we want, and that won't affect the desktop view at all.
Okay.
So what would you just want, like blank padding around the image then, or because basically on my phone this takes up it takes up the full width.
Right.
And so if I shrink the picture, what would we like? Let's say I make the picture half size and center it. That's not. I mean, I guess it would save a little bit of vertical space, but not a ton. And then it would just have what, like gray. That's the other thing too. I really don't like these colors, but I haven't got around to changing them yet. But would you just rather see like that blank kind of grayish blue color instead of the pictures?
I don't know. I mean, it just seems like, the pictures are obviously AI generated, if anybody knows what AI is. And it just seems that we're taking up too much screen real estate for fluff, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe like thumbnails in front of the title or something.
That's kind of what I was thinking, but that might make them so small that you can't tell what they are.
Yeah.
Weird
Yeah.
idea, Sean. And you may hate me for asking this, but have you ever been on a website where as you scroll kind of like in between things, you can see the background picture? I'm wondering if like the text could hover over the picture. So like as you're scrolling, you can see the picture in between. And then as you scroll up, you go to the next card or whatever, it's actually the next card's picture that's in the background. So it's available if you want to see it, but it doesn't monopolize the screen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know who you think I am, but that is not.
That's professional, aren't you?
Oh man.
And my suggestion there, Sean, would be is you've got so many platforms out there and so many different browsers, even on mobile. Not everybody uses Chrome. You got Safari, and I think it'd be a major pain in the wazoo to try to come up with something that looked right on all the platforms.
No, this should. I feel like this should work on everything. I've tested on Firefox and Edge. It doesn't look great on my tablet right now, but I can easily fix that. It's not that big a deal. But no, I think it should work great on every browser. So if you find a browser that it doesn't that it just looks broken or janky on, please let me know and I'll fix it. Because I think it should look good, or at least decent on every browser, every screen size.
There's another question for Scott. I remember 5 years ago, he had a website that would test a site in every possible browser and show it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and you know, Grant brought up doing some, like in an email, he brought up doing some hover animations and things like that. And I definitely think stuff like that is a good idea. But, you know, also, you know, I think there's a lot of more important things that we need to do, like get this to be the main site. So like there's still some features missing and stuff like that, like the calendar. Like the calendar is nowhere on the new site yet. And like the donation page is nowhere on the new site yet. And the wiki isn't linked anywhere, you know, so there's like a ton of things that need to happen to this site that I feel are more important than like the style things, and especially like animations and hover and stuff. And so I'm also trying to prioritize a little bit. But as far as your comment about these pictures being too big, I guess if you can come up with like an example, like I guess that would help me, right? Like if you can find like an example, like some other website that you think does this kind of thing better, then that would help me have something to kind of take as a reference. But as far as just like shrinking the pictures and just having like gray around them instead, I don't really love that idea. But I'm not closed to any idea. I'm open for ideas. Just I think visual examples would be great.
Yeah, yeah. Now that you talk about it, I was thinking thumbnail next to the title, but you know, then the title may or may not fit depending on how big the image is in the mobile view. So I don't know if something to keep in mind as you work through it.
Yeah, mobile users are used to scrolling a lot, right? I mean, that's when your screen is only like 3 inches wide, you're used to scrolling vertically a lot. So I don't think the scrolling a lot is really a negative when it comes to the mobile.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks for the comments and things. But yeah, I really want to focus on like what are the big things that we need to get done in order to make this like the main site. Because you know, if you look at our, you know, and I'm not trying to throw shade or anything, but like it doesn't even have the like it kind of, I don't know, I just think this one's better even in its current form with the bugs and the issues that we've pointed out. I just think it's better with like how it links to the presenters with the presentations and all that. I just think it's, and so I just want this to become like our main site. And then once that happens, then I feel like we can spend time on like, you know, the more kind of personal taste, personal choice kind of design niceties, I'd say.
Yeah, sure.
That's great. Thank you.
And this one also does, just one more thing I want to show off. This has an RSS feed as well. So if you're someone like me who doesn't want to subscribe to email mailing list, you could subscribe to this RSS feed. I mean, don't do it because it's on a placeholder domain, but you could subscribe if you have like an RSS reader, you could subscribe to this. And every time we post a new meeting, you would get that in your RSS feed, which I think is kind of cool.
We should be able to put much of the blurb you have per meeting in each card for RSS.
Yeah, and I just did that very quickly following a tutorial, but yeah, I'm sure we could put more details than what I have in there.
Yeah, this is you've got a lot of great things and a lot of great ideas. I think we're just very early, and there's some very early representations of some things. There's some things you've obviously put a lot of effort in and look very nice, but like the RSS is very new.
Yeah, totally agree. The other thing is too, I'd like to have so the feedback during SteerCon the other night was that nobody likes this logo for SLUUG, which I get. I'm as you know, I did all these with an AI. I'm not good at this stuff, like this graphic design stuff. Like, no, I've never done this before in my life. So of course I'm not going to be good at it. What I tried to get the AI to generate here was like the St. Louis skyline with the arch, but instead of buildings, it's servers. But nobody, I don't think that's coming across how I thought it was. And so that's another thing too. If nobody likes this logo, we shouldn't use it. I don't want to use it if nobody likes it, obviously. But by the same token, I don't have anything else. So
Hey, Sean, flip back to that logo.
yeah. Sorry. Where'd I go with it? Right here.
I just realized what I didn't like about it. The fact that the buildings are obviously duplicated on both sides, which is not reality. The two things that strike me as incongruous is the stack of widgets there that aren't servers or look like floppy drives or Mac minis, but the fact that you've got the same set of buildings mirrored on both sides.
Oh, like these two in the middle here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the two on the outside and the ones in the middle.
Yeah, that might be more than my beyond my capabilities to change all that stuff. Like I said, I'm not. This is the best I could come up with, which I agree is not very good. But yeah, I'm not.
No. What I'm saying is, if take your stanza your stanza that you generated that with, and just say, make the skyline more realistic, and drop the stack of machines in favor of something that looks like a real server.
Yeah.
Type of thing, and just see if, or send me the stanza. I've been playing around on Chat GPT.
Realistic asymmetrical skyline.
One of the things I disliked was kind of the monochromatic, and one of the things we talked about was adding a cardinal, and I've also considered adding a beastie or tux. I don't know if there's, I guess BSD has the pufferfish. I don't know if there's a more traditional Unix logo. Like, can we pepper in some things on this to make it more Unix generic, but not just gray rectilinear things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Lee, if you're on, I don't have the the prompt for this anymore. But if you're on ChatGPT, which I'm not subscribed to anymore, so I don't think I can access this. I mean, I could resubscribe or whatever. But if you go on there, one of the custom GPTs is called Logo Designer, something like that, and it asks you for these things, right? It asks you what colors do you want. It asks you how complicated do you want the logo to be, and then it asks you for the prompt. And so that's how I was able to get what I got here. And this one, people seem to generally like this one. So this is the one I've been putting everywhere. So I put this one on Meetup. I put this one on the YouTube channel. This is the one that I've been spreading for now. But yeah, if we can come up with a better one, it's very easy to change. So I'm all for it.
Well, the other one has 2 L's and 1 U, and this one has 1 L and 2 U's.
Yeah, so what I was going for originally was the LUG and then the Unix. Because if you click on this one, it takes you to the Unix meeting, and then if you click on this one, it takes you to the Linux meeting. And so I was kind of going for one for each meeting, like we had before. And that's the other thing too. I'm wondering, like right now we have these kind of SLUUG and STL lug kind of links here, but I'm just not sure if I see the value of separating them, right? Because I'm getting used to seeing them like on this home page here. It's both. So this is our Linux meeting we have coming up next week. This is the meeting we're at now, and it looks kind of having them all together to me just seems kind of more natural than like I'm not sure why you would ever look, oh, I only want to see the LUG meetings, or oh, I only want to see the SLUUG meetings.
Yeah.
Does anybody think they have a use case for that?
Not really. The historic of it is the SLUUG name existed before Linux existed, and I can graphically remember the first time one of our members said, "Hey, there's this new thing called Linux. I want to do a talk on it." And so it was there prior to the name Linux being common. And then LUGs, Linux user groups, started popping up in different cities. So we called ours St. Louis LUG. And but we also ran the St. Charles lug and the Old Monroe Lincoln County lug, and what was it, the Missouri open source
MoSlug or something like that.
MoSlug or MoLug.
Oh, here you go.
So, you know, there used to be multiple lugs, and they basically all kind of consolidated and just become the St. Louis lug. I take that back. I shouldn't say that, because there are still one or two lugs over on the Illinois side of the river, which were never under our domain, but they were cooperative groups that we were always friendly with. And, so I'm presuming, I haven't noticed if they're still operating. I haven't paid a lot of attention recently, to be honest. But anyway, so yeah, it's just the history of there used to be that distinction of having multiple geographic areas here in St. Louis that had lug groups.
On the flip side of that, I have noticed on too many occasions, in my opinion, traditional Unix admins kind of feeling holier than thou and wouldn't deign to use Linux if you held a gun to their head. So there's some animosity.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys I work with and interact with weekly likes to refer to open source as shareware, and it's like, I don't want any of that shareware shit on my server. And I think to myself every time, do you like SSH? I haven't said that yet. I want to work well with him, but there's that animosity, and I've run into that multiple times in the AIX, some in the Solaris, some in HPUX. There's really not many others active anymore that I'm aware of. So, and I've not experienced that as part of this community, but I've seen it elsewhere, and I thought maybe it was out of respect for some of that.
Yeah, there was a little bit of Linux versus the other types of Unix, but I think that may be finally going away.
Yeah, since most of the Unixes are dead.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure some of the old BSD proponents would kill me for saying this, but let's be realistic. BSD is still very alive, and it's one of the most used operating systems. Only we call it Mac OS and iOS. I mean, Apple is the biggest promoter of a BSD system.
Yeah, but that's what they started with 30 years ago. I doubt very seriously if anything under the here today.
Within the last 5 years, they have had XOpen certification and legal right to call themselves Unix with a capital U.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. There have also been Linuxes that have been certified and had the right to call themselves Unix with a capital U. Yep. I think they let that expire, but due to day job, I know that Santa Cruz is still in operation and still selling licenses.
Really? I didn't realize that. Wow.
They have actually come up with multiple new versions.
Wow, I hadn't heard that name in I don't know how long.
Yeah, they merged OpenServer and UnixWare, and they call it, so they merged OpenServer 5 and UnixWare 7, and they call it OpenServer 6. They came out, and I think this is fucking hilarious, they came out with a Linux-based version for a few years. And they now have OpenServer 10, I think I saw on their website. It's no longer the same company, but it's the name passed around in legal rights and the lawsuit, and they're different legal entities still associated. Like we've got double digit, I don't deal with them, but we've got double digit, high double digit, low triple digit SCO servers on VMware at work. Hey, it works.
Oh, that's another name I hadn't heard in a long time.
Yeah. Okay, we really extended our usual Q&A, but I thought things were going so well there, I really hated to cut it off. So for those of you who didn't think you were going to be part of that discussion tonight, I'm sorry if you felt we were abusing your time, but I thought it was an interesting discussion, both the state of the Unixes, plural, open source, and also of our efforts to redevelop our website. And so thank you very much for the efforts there. And again, anyone who would like to help contribute a little bit, I'm sure it would be very, very much appreciated. And by the same token, I apologize. It's largely my fault for not getting publicity out earlier about tonight's meeting. We had we'd gotten things picked, and but then, like I said, I had some family who wound up in the hospital, and Stan was visiting his family out of town, so he's on an airplane tonight. And Lee, of course, was actually putting together a presentation, so we really were kind of stretched thin. If anybody would ever like, it's not a technical job really, but just to help do some of the publicity, stick things out on Meetup, stick things on the calendar. Yeah, we can always use some more publicity people. Robert Levitt's helping putting together the announce presentations. So yeah, volunteers are always welcome. So with that, now that I've yacked on about all that, we do still have our main presentation of the evening. And so as advertised, Lee Lammert and again, Grant Taylor are going to continue on and tell us about kind of diagnosing a real world network problem. So I'll turn it over to Lee.
All right. Share a screen here if I can find the right one. I think that's it. There we go. All right. There is a nagging problem that I've been dealing with for a long time. And one of the interesting things when Grant and I started this discussion on basic remote data capture a couple of years ago, a couple of months ago rather, was the fact that it would help me diagnose the problem. And that is, this is a server out on a client site. It's a OpenSuSE 15.5 server current. It has 2 Windows VMs running on it. And the Windows VMs are happy, except for one thing.
Okay, drop the news.
Hang on a second.
You need to twiddle a bit.
I know.
There's a little white lie that Lee and I, as tested my slides, kind of walked through it, and we actually solved his problem over the weekend. But we're going to reenact it, and he left it in the fixed configuration.
I took it out, but I think I put it back by mistake.
So some of this is pro forma, but it is the last 2 presentations base we did prior to this one were build up to tonight's base was an aside how to do things last month securely. And then this is a real world example that Lee and I went through, I think Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and identified the problem with his environment in probably less than an hour and a half, including the time of him setting up, going through the steps on the slides that I presented earlier, so he could securely remotely capture traffic off the system and identify what was wrong with networking. And once we knew what was wrong, we were able to find what was causing it.
Ah, crap. All right, Grant. I'm gonna have to get some help here.
Okay. What's up?
This is what we found, right?
Yes, that is the functional setting. You want to turn that to a 1 to break things.
Ah, okay, I got it. And so what's wrong with this?
Not syscontrol. Is it syscontrol?
I think you need a -P, don't you? -P.
You can also just echo a 1 into a path. So
No, there was a syscontrol.
yeah, I'm conflating syscontrol with systemctl. Try syscontrol-w, your value equals 1. Is there a module that's not loaded at present?
Proxys net bridge.
I think you need a period between net and bridge in your syscontrol statement.
There we go. Okay,
This
Thanks.
is.
go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
So this is the problem. And it has been hanging around a long time.
Did you make that font bigger?
Unfortunately, well, let's see, hang on a second. Unfortunately, this is a Windows window.
Properties on the left-hand side.
Is that any better?
Much better, thanks. Good.
The problem is neither one of these two VMs can actually use the internet because DNS is broken. The evidence here is if you try to ping a host, let's make it full size. Here, let's time out. Now there's a simple way to fix that. Just kill the firewall. In which case, it'll work. And so that's what I've been doing for a couple of years here because these VMs are not used in production. They're used for development purposes. In fact, right now they're not used at all. If this was a production situation, the problem would be a lot more important, and I would have had to solve it a couple of years ago. So anyway, that's the history. That makes sense to everybody? In these VMs, with the firewall not running, DNS works. If I turn the firewall on,
That's probably cached.
yeah, probably cached.
ipconfig/flush DNS or something, I think. Oh God, that's back in the XP days for me. You know, the old saying where I cut my teeth was, if you can't figure something out, give it to the Unix guys, they'll figure it out.
So you can ping the IP address 142.250.190.46.
Yeah, I can pick an IP address if I can type straight.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But you can't. But DNS will not resolve. I hate Windows because it doesn't have dig and NS lookup is too many characters, so I just ping a site. And it can't, the DNS traffic, the DNS query cannot get a response when the Windows VMs send it out. And of course, Windows being very descriptive, he doesn't know what the error is. He just says it could not find the host.
So
Okay.
when Lee described this to me 2-ish months ago, it's like, well, my go-to wrench to reach for in the box is a network sniffer. And that kind of we were also dealing with something on the discuss mailing list, DNS timeouts related to something with DMARC, I think.
So DNS is the DNS servers outside the firewall.
Well, the DNS server is at the router. This machine is internal. And
The firewall's running on the machine, obviously.
well, yeah, in this case, this is the server that's actually on site. Where, yeah, here is the bridge device. Because obviously when you have a VM running on a machine, you can't use the network interface itself. You have to add a bridge device. So both the host and the VMs can see that, can see the bridge as opposed to the actual Ethernet port. So this is BR0. That is the one that gets an IP address internally. And then the DNS server is the router, which is .254, which is also the default route for the machine. Does that track? So we have a bridge device. We have a virtual NIC on each VM. And then we have a bridge device on the host to which everybody connects. And the bridge device on the host is the one that is configured with the network address.
Another important thing is the host itself can do DNS lookups without a problem.
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Yeah. That was another symptoms or symptom
Feature.
And the firewall now is running. Although there is some weird IP table stuff here that I never have figured out. But one of the clues is the fact that there's a bunch of IP table stuff in here from Docker. So there is my original assumption was there is some kind of interaction between IP tables and systemd, or firewall D rather. And since firewall D is managed by systemd and it is totally obfuscated from a data standpoint because everything is done in basically a linked list, it's a pain in the butt to troubleshoot. The tool that we have, there's a firewall manager in SUSE, which is part of YAST, and I've talked about this before. You know, the BR0 is the internal interface, and that internal zone has a bunch of stuff: DHCP, DNS, DNS over TLS, MDNS, Samba, and Samba client is what you need for Samba, and then SSH. And it should accept DNS and it should accept DHCP because BR0 is in that internal zone. And at one point as a troubleshooting step, I also added ETH0 in the internal zone, but didn't make any difference. Okay, does that make sense?
I hear something in the background, but if it's somebody speaking who wants to be heard, we can't understand.
Yeah,
you.
I think it was Steve. He is muted. Okay. By the way, Steve, glad to see you back. I guess you got your phone working. Okay, so what would we want to do here at this point?
This would be a case where I would start tcpdump, or since we have now made remote capturing work with Wireshark, I would sniff the bridge interface while it's in its broken configuration and look at the traffic to see if what we expect is there or not.
Okay. By the way, this is my safe window. Whenever I'm fooling around with firewalls or config files or whatever the changes you have to make similar, any situation like we're doing now. As Grant mentioned, I have a tab open here. I'm logged in as root. If something breaks, I have an open connection to go in and resolve the problem. Here's a window that I was working in. Notice that we have the offline added. Here. This is the line in the sudo file, which means that this authentication option applies to the sudo command. Here is, God damn it. This, oops, I didn't put it now. We didn't need it now. So here is the sudo line, which is what I used. Here is the one with the defaults that we added in. This was
Etsy sudoers.
sudoers. Okay. Here's the same thing in the SU file. I added that here while we were talking about it. So at this point, I should be able to capture data.
You have the command handy?
Yeah.
Okay. So before you hit enter, you see that he has the -A to forward the agent on his connection. And he is logging into the WSD system and using sudo, which will leverage the authentication I presented earlier this evening to grant his normal unprivileged user the necessary security to be able to run tcpdump, which is a privileged process. And that command as is will run on the remote system. Are you going to add the end of that to bring it back and show up locally?
Okay. So here's the rest of the commands we need for tcpdump that routes it to standard out, which is then piped to Wireshark, in this case on my local machine, for display.
Window, window, window. Who's got the window?
Good question. There it is.
There it is. So you now see Wireshark running on his local workstation, sniffing traffic with the help of tcpdump, started securely on the remote system.
Now, realize that I am looking at bridge 0, port 53. Well, why am I getting traffic?
That,
And why is it going all over the world?
I have a snarky answer because Windows is chatty. Beep.
Okay.
So if you, at this point, seeing the traffic going to the bridge interface, I had asked Lee if we could, rather than the bridge interface, if we could sniff the actual Ethernet interface that traffic should be going out. Because of the experience I have tracing things and dealing with things like this, I wanted to make sure it was getting through.
So that TCP dump was bridge 0.
That was just outgoing requests that weren't coming back, or
That is part of the problem.
That was part of the problem. Notice that everything was going out. There was nothing coming back.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So the next step was to look at just the traffic on ETH0.
So same command, just a different interface. And there's no DNS queries. So, and if you would please poke and it'll time out, but yeah. So we know the Windows chattiness was happening. Lee has initiated a known happening manual test, but it's not going out the ETH0 interface. And that's about the time I went, I wonder. And it took me another 10 minutes to find what I wanted to check. And that's when we found, and I had to do some searches to find things, but we found that IP tables traffic filtering is being applied to bridge traffic. So what that means is what is normally a layer 3 filtering operation on routed or forwarded traffic is being applied to layer 2 bridged traffic.
Are you going to show the role in the IP tables, or?
It's not an IP tables rule that changes that. It is a kernel tunable that changes that. IP tables will either, it always filters layer 3, and you can make it filter above. Back when I started dealing with it, filtering layer 2 bridged traffic was an option you had to turn on. It was while working with Lee that I learned that that's now the default. It's like, let's turn it off for a few minutes. So Lee, if you would,
Well, the first thing I was going to show is you came up with the bridge NF filter, NF call IP tables.
Yep.
And that's where we came up with his value.
And I think I had some 4-letter expletives when I saw that. And so the firewall itself is still enabled and you have not changed anything and queries are failing at present, correct?
What does that bridge NF call IP tables represent?
So NF is short for net filter, which is the IP tables filtering. The net filter is just the internal code name that has existed since 2.4, I think. And it wasn't until recently with NF tables that things changed, but that harks back. So what this is doing is it's saying net filter apply to bridged traffic, or apply IP tables, or call net filter IP tables on bridged traffic. There's some wordsmithing that happens. When it's set to 1, it means apply IP tables to bridged traffic. So you need additional rules to enable, to allow that traffic to flow. Without those, most firewalls are written as if they're working on layer 3 operations, routing or port forwarding or something. When you want to apply IP tables, layer 3 process, to layer 2 bridged frames, you can, but it requires additional rules. And in some ways, you have some additional virtual interfaces and additional options, like in BR0, in interface ETH0, or it gets really weird and it's crossing a layer boundary. It can mess with things. It can be good, but you need to know what it is and want it. So I had asked Lee, let's try disabling that and see if the DNS queries start working.
Is that gonna open up all bridge traffic?
Yes.
These other bridge traffic?
What it does is it tells the kernel not to apply IP tables to layer 2 bridged traffic. If you're routing from something else, IP tables is still applied.
You're routing from something else, IP tables is still applied.
Where I usually see this is the use case I had was ETH0 connected to LAN. Bridge 0 was its own independent thing that had multiple VMs or user mode Linux environments connected to it, but it was like ETH0, and I called it BRI 0, to like might as well be ETH0 and ETH3. And I was routing between those interfaces. And I would apply IP tables as if it was ETH0, ETH1, ETH2, ETH3. When bridging IP tables is enabled, it applies the same set of rules differently. So it first applies it at the routed level, and then it also applies the same set of rules to the bridged traffic. And you need different rules to accommodate that, or if you're not, I think most people don't actually want to apply IP tables filtering to bridged traffic. Historically, if you wanted to filter bridged traffic, that's what EB tables, as in Ethernet bridging tables, was for. So diagnostic purposes, I asked him to use that syscontrol to cause the kernel to not apply IP tables to bridged traffic. Now that you've done that, go back over to your Wireshark window, please. So we can see his ping to Omnitech worked, multiple other things. And if you flip back to the Wireshark, you should see bidirectional DNS traffic.
I think I closed it. Let me go ahead and restart it.
Ah, okay. I thought you had it running in the background, sorry. So we see standard query and response going through. So that told me everything I needed to know about what the problem was. IP tables was filtering his bridged traffic, which, my opinion, based on the environments I've worked in, he does not need and actually wants to not have.
Did you run the Wireshark with on the bridge? See the responses that, because before we've seen traffic go out but not come back.
Fair.
Yeah, here's the query and the response.
Is that running against the bridge interface or the ETH0 interface right now?
He didn't stop it.
ETH0.
Yeah, can you stop it and change it back to the ETH0 interface?
That's what it's on.
Bridge.
I'm sorry, bridge interface.
Oh, okay.
Keep chatting Windows again.
But I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask it.
Throw it out there and
Throw it out there.
Because main reason might not be appropriate, a conversation for later, but not now. I don't really have a question about the networking part of it, but since you're doing something, when you said remote system, you meant just another part of the same server, but it's remote because it's something contained inside a Docker container.
No,
No. This physical server that I am, all right, where's my shell window? Okay, this is a shell window right here.
Yes.
This main server is in Kirkwood. This is at one of our clients in Kirkwood. The physical machine is called main server. That physical machine I am connected to here with Virtual Machine Manager. And this is the WSD on-site server. And there are 2 VMs on that server, in addition to OpenSuSE, which runs basically Samba for the office.
Okay. The main question I'm asking really, what is a Docker? Is it a simple container or on even a remote system? If it has a host OS on that and a Docker container, is a Docker container more like another sub VM? In other words, during the time that the kernel.
A Docker container is a segregated part of the file system that is identified as a container, and it contains executable code, which is run by the Docker daemon. Right now, there are 7 Docker containers running on this server that have absolutely nothing to do with what we've been talking about.
Okay, I've done only a little bit with Docker. That's what I'm asking. I supported a client that was a medical clinic. They ran a certain program. They found it easiest to run on Amazon or one of the DigitalOcean or something. Right now, it's been so long. And I did a memory dump right after I didn't have to support it anymore. But it had 2 containers. One did backup. But running code runs within that container because the master kernel runs everything on a particular machine. It runs the host OS, it runs the container, and if a container contains executable code, in which time the kernel tasks those processes that are actually code within the container, it actually is whatever. That's what you're talking about in this bridge is.
Now, the bridge has nothing to do with the container.
But
the bridge is networking. And this is one of the containers. And right here, I just connected to that container. And I ran a bash shell inside the container.
yes.
And this is I am now inside the container.
Yes. But let's say this container, like my example, the customer I supported, the backup program wasn't installed with the native package of the actual virtual machine. The backup software only came installed in the executables of the backup program only once the Docker container was mounted or made active at boot. So the kernel would then be running things outside the container of the native applications on that server, but of backup software, which were executables, whenever it gave control over the processes that were owned of that container. So let's say my backup program backed up remotely, it needed network access because it would then back up to an S3 bucket on Amazon or whatever. It might need network rules that the container knows about to get outside the container to see the network through the host that it ran on so they could see the remote S3 bucket so they could dump the backup itself and someplace to be stored.
Well, you're basically just describing the application for IP tables when Docker is installed. You know, Docker is installed on this server because of that one application that we've got running. It's the Greenbone vulnerability scanner. And when you install Docker, Docker sets up IP tables to handle all the traffic for the Docker system.
Yes.
And within these rules are accept rules, forward rules. I don't see a NAT table. I think that's handled inside Docker itself, but basically
Scroll further down.
Because what it sounded like when you were describing that option was there were rules that were telling that when it was inside the container, it was chatting, but there wasn't rules on the operating system outside the Docker on the same machine that would then let it see the internet. So you had a bunch of chatter that went nowhere, yet it still would take up processing time. And
the chatter that went nowhere was due to the kernel on the system, because the chatting was from the VM to the bridge device to the kernel to the outside world. Docker was not involved. The fact that Docker is installed on here has had nothing to do with the problem that we were seeing.
okay. But that's what I'm saying. I'm confused exactly what all Docker, even though it's like a sub-installed OS with its own subdirectory tree.
Docker, this machine is both a virtual machine host hosting some Windows VMs and a Docker host hosting multiple Docker containers. The problem at hand had nothing to do with Docker. The symptoms were inside the VMs.
Okay, because the networking is actually always handled by the kernel itself.
Effectively, yes. There's some nuances.
Yeah.
It's been enlightening what parts I've been able to wrap my head around. So.
But you asked what the remote aspect was. The key point is Lee is running tcpdump, which is a nice sniffer, but it only has certain capabilities. That is running on the machine in Kirkwood. Lee is sitting in his basement, and I'm not sure which little burb he's in, but I believe it's not Kirkwood either. Anyway, where Wireshark is running on Lee's machine is miles away from the machine where tcpdump is running. So tcpdump is running in Kirkwood and analyzing with Wireshark remotely at his house.
I sort of understand some of that because at one time I worked on Boeing servers for Boeing aircraft while in Florida, where Boeing here in Florida is Boeing Space. And I would have to log in on my Windows machine, contact some way halfway across the coast, find a bastion, drill into the bastion. And once I was on the bastion, then I could see servers with inside Boeing that were never available outside, the internal Boeings.
Right. And Boeing is a good example of security where you want the bare minimum installed on secure systems. And there are people who will tell you that Wireshark and the dissectors it has is potentially an attack surface. So that can be run on a workstation that Lee probably doesn't want to format and reinstall his workstation, but arguably it is potentially a throwaway machine, or could be, and it can receive traffic from a server in a remote environment and analyze it locally with all the capabilities and configuration. Another example where I used to use this is I had my workstation in my office in Columbia, and I would log into routers in Glasgow and Avaz and Centralia and Springfield, and I would have those captures come back real time to Wireshark running on my workstation, where I had all my preferences and things set up to make analyzing traffic simpler. So the remote is two separate systems with some amount of network space between them.
Yeah, there's sub networks that we don't see if we're just on the ordinary internet. I also worked for SIS Global for a bit, and there's banks that connect back to, you know, our money isn't the money we think it is anymore. We got folding paper and change in our pocket, but all real money is just numbers and banks, but not the banks we know. There's companies like FIS Global that actually the banks buy programs, and our real money is in computers and in computers only. They route information in between these banks that you don't know about, right, where the money really is digitally, and the bank teller that you go in and they type in a terminal. Them terminals they type into deal with these products. You can get a report, it'll come from some other state where the money really is, and print. And I had to set up printers and some networking. I'm not a networking guy myself, but I'm the guy that changed things on servers and changed configurations in printers, or at least made sure that the numbers in the printer were the correct IP numbers. And if you type them same IT numbers into a web browser, they never resolve, because even though it's all IPv4, it's some frame relay stuff that isn't tied to the internet that we see.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's separate networks. A lot of times they're physical, but in today's network world, the VPN serves that kind of purpose. You know, I've got a VPN set up here on one of the servers in the shop, and when I'm traveling, I start up my laptop, start the VPN, and I am physically connected over a virtual private network to the office. Everything I do is totally secure, unless the NSA decides they don't like me for some reason. One other point I wanted to make is Wireshark is a great tool with a lot of capabilities for dissecting network traffic, but Wireshark can't run on that server. Wireshark can't run on any server that we manage. Anybody want to guess why?
I'll bite my tongue.
It allows you to know
Oh.
too much in
Well,
areas you aren't supposed to be touching, even though you have admin rights.
No, it had nothing to do with it. Why would Wireshark not run on that server?
Then it has something to do with the network layer that it can't
Nope.
see
No.
inside and outside at the same
No.
time.
Nothing to do with the
I
network.
don't know.
It's even simpler than that.
Software dependencies.
What is this? What's that interface?
Oh, it's a MS Windows machine.
No.
No? Okay.
The text console.
Okay.
And why would that be a problem?
Well, graphics, most people will tell you don't work in a text console. I'm not most people.
No server that we manage has Windows on X Windows on it.
Okay.
So Wireshark can't run on it.
Okay.
But it ain't that hard to put an X server on a Windows box.
It's not a Windows box. It's a Linux box. And it ain't gonna happen. There's too much crap in X Windows. It's bad enough we got to run it on a workstation. It's never,
Okay.
I'm never gonna have it on a server.
Okay.
There's
Well, you're taking the
say,
information off to a machine that you don't mind
Right.
loading up with the bloatware.
And if Wireshark happens to blow up my local workstation, it's my problem.
Mhm.
It's not the client's.
Yeah.
But also go review some of the early published material on the X server. Server and client are flipped. The
It doesn't make any
server,
difference. I'm not running X on a server, period.
but you don't. An
Yes,
X
you do.
server,
You have to have an X server, X client program on the server, and you have to be able to run that X code on the server so you can share the screen to the local server that you're using to view it. It's just like VNC.
I have one more comment about X. The server is not the server. Your client that you perceive as Windows is actually the one that does all the work in X anyway. The
That's the GUI
application,
work. The program still has to have X installed on the server so the program can run and generate the graphic screen that you display on the remote X server.
I think that's incorrect.
No,
You
you need you have
you
dependency.
have to have the graphics libraries. The
Yes,
actual X executable itself only runs on what we perceive is the client, but in X terminology from the original books, because there was like 8 books altogether, and I own 3 of them. O'Reilly, way beginning. We're talking.
yep.
Motif was the latest, greatest in anything graphical. That widget set.
If I can interject real quick, when having this discussion, I tend to refer to it as the X11 display server
Yes.
and the X11 client application. So, yes, with proper network connectivity and SSH X forwarding helps, Lee could set up an X11 display server at his house, which he probably has one unless it's Wayland. And then he could run Wireshark as an X11 client application to display on the X11 display server in his house.
Yes.
But that is additional networking problems. That is additional software
It
dependencies.
is chatty.
And this completely avoids any X11 dependencies on the remote server.
Yeah, because there's xlib and some other thing, and it's the very lowest thing. By the time we get to GNOME and KDE, there's a bunch of other tacked on top
You
of it.
can get X11 client applications to run on a headless system without needing a window manager. You can get it fairly small, but it is still additional dependencies that often do not need to be there.
Oh, it's a convoluted mess. But one of the first things when I got a 46 powerful enough to start playing with X is I ran Xeyes and then read the manuals and seen how it was all flipped backwards in terminology. Because all you're doing is moving 2 little black dots around. And Xeyes is wherever you move the mouse cursor, 2 screwy looking eyeballs in the middle of the screen. The eyeballs keep looking at wherever the mouse rolls.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, terminology aside, X does have some backwards terminology, but you cannot run Wireshark on that remote server unless you install a bunch of dependencies that will allow it to execute.
Yeah.
You don't need a window manager. You don't need you don't need other things, but that is cruft that doesn't need to be there, and it will never be installed on any server that I manage.
It makes a mess. I mean, I went through a lot of trouble, but I was in learn everything new at that phase. So I played, poked at everything just a little bit to see whether I could wrap my head around it. Because there's a lot of jump in between.
Playing and experiencing is a wonderful thing to do on equipment at your house.
Yep.
It's a great opportunity, whereas if you crash something, well, crap.
No, you don't play with this stuff on somebody else's production machine. You never play with stuff on somebody else's production machine. You don't want to have that conversation prior to them showing you the door.
So we're at the point that Lee and I parted ways Saturday or Sunday. Things were functional. He knew. So the firewall is still enabled. Lee, if you go and check the status of Firewall D, it's still enabled, correct? Yep. So, and we left it at, you have a workaround. I would argue he doesn't want to apply IP tables to bridged traffic, but that's a completely different discussion compared to where we started. Why isn't DNS working? We now have an answer to that, and the question turns into, do we care about the configuration that broke DNS?
Well, whether we care or not, this is the way to implement a permanent fix until you come up with another problem. until another problem develops.
Yep. So that we're now 3 base presentations and arguably a main presentation into network sniffing, doing it remotely and doing it securely with a real world application demonstration of how it enabled you to solve a multi-year problem. And you can see that we found it in less than an hour from the start time of actually sniffing, which this has been a reoccurring theme to me. Something's weird. I don't know what's going on in the network. I wish I could see something. Immediately start screaming network sniffer in my head. It's a tool I reach to frequently. It provides visibility and information that means you're not blind to something. Because Lee, I'll be willing to bet you went through lots of log files trying to solve this over the years.
Yeah, to the point I got tired of doing it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But thanks to some good tools and another pair of eyeballs looking at things, we got the problem at least fixed at this point.
So how'd you route traffic back to you routed it back to your local machine where you do have Xen and Wireshark installed, right?
Right.
Yes. He is SSHing from the machine in his house to the server at the client's office, and he is having tcpdump write to standard out. That's the left-hand side of the pipe. And the right-hand side of the pipe is Wireshark running at his house, reading from standard in. So tcpdump on the remote server is doing the actual sniffing, sending the packets of interest through the SSH connection to Wireshark listening at his house.
So you don't need any configuration on that. That just automatically the pipe is not routing to
the configuration needed is the I think the -U disables some buffering, alters how some things are printed by tcpdump. The -W space dash is the -W says write to this file, big air quotes. And the space dash after it is the long established Unix convention for standard out. And then for writing. And then subsequently, the other side of the pipe, the -I space dash
from standard in, yeah.
Wireshark read in from this file, and since it's read operation referencing dash, that says read from standard in. So we're writing to standard out on the remote server across the SSH connection, and we're taking that standard out and we're plumbing it with the pipe into Wireshark's standard in. That make sense?
Eventually it will.
Feel free to ask questions, and I'm happy to discuss this further on any of the mailing lists, or my real address is there. Feel free to email me.
If I can find it, I
So
will.
what's the 0? Is that what's the -S0?
S0, the -S is snapshot length, as in how much of the packet to capture. 0 means get all of it.
Okay.
25 years ago, when I was first exposed to capturing, there was a lot of how much can we actually legally sniff. And there's been some evolution, and it's mostly we're the network admins. We've told people we have the capability and we will use it for troubleshooting. We can sniff as much as we want. But if I only wanted the first IP header, I feel like I want to capture 20 bytes of the packet. A lot of people would also capture up to 60 bytes to get the IP header, the TCP header, and a little bit, but not potentially all of the maybe 1,500 byte packet. I want to look at the flow, who's talking, but I don't care about the payload. So don't give me the last 1.4K of the packet. I only care about the first part, who's talking to whom. What we're doing, I almost always want to look at things at the application level and see what's happening. So I include the -S0 snapshot 0, give me everything. Make sense?
Yep, cool, thanks.
And I'd have to check the man page for Wireshark, what the -K does. I guess I can check that fairly quickly.
I just posted this on chat if anyone wants to grab a copy. And then you can, look at the man page and dissect it. Most of them are fairly explanatory. Interface BR0, port 53. I don't remember. I'm not sure about the cap U and the S.
The capital U is unbuffered, and that has to do with how often does tcpdump print things on the output, line buffered versus character buffered or something like that.
S0.
Snapshot size of 0, which 0 means the entire packet.
Okay.
You just went over that.
Sorry, say again.
Well, you just went over that. I asked about it, and you explained it to me.
I'm looking up the -K for Wireshark. Start capture session immediately is what the -K does. So we're taking multiple components, SSH as a transport. We're using what we went through tonight to make authentication to sudo much easier, transparent, get out of the way and not prompt. And we're using sudo to launch Wireshark, to launch tcpdump, saying we want to listen to ETH0. We care about stuff on port 53. Don't buffer the traffic. Give me the entire packet and write what you get to standard out. We're then plumbing that standard out into Wireshark's standard in, which is the -I space dash, and start the capture right away.
I think what's confusing me is the like if you were to do like echo something to standard out or something to standard out and do a pipe to less, because you're SSH'd on that server, the less that would be running would be on that server.
It depends where it gets very tricky. Lee, if you would highlight from user bin sudo through the -w-.
I mean, just not this example, just like a normal, you're just doing a normal pipe into less, something into less, then the less that would be running would be local to that server.
No.
Where your SSH to.
If you had a normal SSH session, yes. This is this is asking SSH to remotely launch sudo with the parameters. Right. This is not a normal interactive SSH session.
Right.
SSH remote commands are a very fun thing. Both white hat and dark hat.
Nice.
So Lee, if you had a weird email issue from these servers in the future, do you think you would be inclined to poke at Wireshark to see if you could figure something out, or maybe ask a friend to help interpret something?
I would most certainly.
Would you be interested in reproducing this to have this capability for other clients?
Certainly. This has actually been pretty enjoyable.
Cool.
Solving problems and learning at the same time.
I would consider that a good Friday night.
Where were you guys last Friday night? We needed some guy was having problems with his wireless device.
The best solution for anything wireless is a shotgun or a Gallagher hammer.
And when you're referring to last Friday night, what, this
Yeah.
was a 2600 meeting, or?
Yeah, you were here, Jerry?
I was not at the 2600 meeting this month.
Phil was here.
That was the Slack meeting. We had Friday because Thursday was July 4th.
Okay. There's always the running argument. 2600 worldwide always meets on the first Friday of the month, and the running joke is, you know, everybody who's at 2600 meetings is either long married or just, the old joke about only geeks are at techie meetings on a Friday night. You're not gonna find a lot of social situations going on there. So, but anyway, the 2600 group is a good group too. They do a lot of good stuff. So, well, this has really been mind hurting. I mean,
There's a reason I read multiple books to get to the point I could make this happen and distill it to functionally 5 slides.
yes. I mean, it's been a great eye opener. And I really thank you two guys for putting in all the time, effort. Came up with the concept of doing this series of talks. And yeah, this has really been great. Great presentation. Learned a lot.
There's a 4th iteration in the future about decrypting encrypted traffic.
Now that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yes, it will be cool. This also, I think our last few minutes of conversation here, you know, the fact that it was 2 people working on this presentation, you know, coming at it from slightly different backgrounds, slightly different approaches, and came up with this great synthesis of how it should work. And it's one of the neat things about being part of this group, about being a presenter in this group, is certainly in any particular meeting, you hopefully will learn some things from the people you chat with in the meeting. But yeah, if you want to take some time and just pair up with somebody, work on a little problem, doesn't have to be a huge, big presentation. You know, sometimes just the little quickies are a lot of fun and enlightening. So, and that leads back to something that we've been talking about off and on for a couple of months. We are intending to upgrade the Debian operating system on Bach, our main group server.
At some point, I'm just going to pull the trigger and do it. I'm getting tired of waiting.
Okay. So I mean, Lee's feeling that you know we're pretty darn close, so we're ready to do it. What was mentioned by a couple of you during the meeting was, you know, it can't do this stuff at work. I mean, damn, if I did this on the work machine and something blew up, I'd get fired. And of course, that means, as was mentioned, we'll do it on your home machine. Well, home machines, yeah, there's only one user. It's you. If the machine goes down, if it crashes, if it doesn't work, you know, it's doesn't hurt anybody else. So you get sloppy and you just try and throw it together. And but something like this, if you would like to volunteer to be part of the upgrade, you know, this is a multi-user system. A bunch of people log in. A bunch of people depend on the mail system. The the website, the archives. So yeah, we can't just say, if it doesn't work, we may be down for a few days.
One comment, as I'm cleaning up here, what's the last thing I do before I close my safety window here?
Test to make sure things are working the way you expect them to. Don't get locked out.
Make sure I can log in again.
Ah, very good.
Right.
Test your sudo access. You didn't SSH with your agent forwarding.
True.
Okay.
I'm not used to using it.
Huh?
I'm not used to using it.
Fair enough. I will say that it is best practice to only forward agents to when logging into systems you trust.
It's not.
-a-WSD.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't even need the sudo I there.
So you're automatically sudo now? You don't have to put sudo in anymore, or it's automatically.
No, try it now, please, Lee.
Yeah.
So when he typed sudo-I, it used the new PAM module to ask the agent, which he
Okay.
forwarded, to cryptographically sign something that the PAM module was able to decrypt using the public key in his authorized key file. Therefore, it trusts that only he has his private key. So it authenticates, but it does so in the background and out of the way, streamlining his interface. And this is why I say it's better security because it's using keys instead of passwords. You know, the key I created was 2048-bit. No password I could ever type is, or would type, is that strong. It's faster. It's less annoying. To me, it is a security win-win.
And you can configure sudo like in the PAM modules the same way you can do it in the sudoers file.
I think you meant, did you mean to say you can configure SU? Or I misunderstood your question.
Well, he's using sudo.
So
Well,
there,
yeah, yeah, you're using you're going through the PAM module, so that's SU then, right?
SU can use the same PAM configuration applied to a different file that sudo and sudo-I. Sudo on some systems, sudo and sudo-I are separate files. But the idea is you add the PAM configuration to the things you want to enable it on.
Just the thing I'm thinking about is that sudoers, I'm sure nobody does it, but I mean, you don't have to give everybody all things. You can just give, you can dole out certain capabilities.
Right. The only thing we changed in sudo, the sudoers file, is the environment variable auth socket. We told sudo don't reset that one variable. And that variable is just a path to the agent socket. All of the rest of sudoers capabilities is still in force, still fully effective. If the sudoers file only allowed Lee to run ifconfig with root privileged and nothing else, that would still be the case. The only thing changed is how Lee authenticates to sudo.
Okay. I think so.
We quite literally added a new capability to the PAM framework. We told sudo, hey, psst, start using that new capability for authentication, and then everything else sudo is known for is still the same as it was. All right, my throat's getting dry and I'm getting hungry. So
Anybody, any other questions?
Just on a generic tech question. I'm interested in all things nerd. One of the things I want to be covering over the next couple of months is, has anybody ever played with the ESP32s or LoRaWAN?
Say again?
Has anybody played with the technology such as the ESP32s or LoRaWAN? It's not Wi-Fi. It's not Bluetooth.
spell the LoRaWAN. I'm having trouble differentiating. I think I've been exposed to it and worked with a friend on it, but
Okay, the first part is LoRa. It's LoRa for long range radio. It's a different modulation that's a short chirp that with high gain antennas can go 40 miles.
okay.
They're
Yeah.
used for tracking buffalo or whatever, where they can tag them. Since it doesn't continually transmit, you can run it off a battery. You know, a battery can last months because Wi-Fi would kill a simple set of button cells rather quickly.
Yeah, a friend and I looked at this. He had some firsthand experience. I did not, and we didn't mess with it because we were outside of the distance. We lived far enough apart. We couldn't make it work.
Okay, and did anybody have a question about what an ESP32 is?
That's a little microcontroller, right?
They're all microcontrollers, like what really powers a Raspberry Pi and what really powers an Arduino, right? Neither one is an ESP32, but yes, we're talking about microprocessors that are actually called microcontrollers because they have more IO, but usually always less outright computer of something that's used on a desktop computer or even a full tablet. They're not as beefy.
Well, there's thousands of them out there.
Yes, Big Micros, AVRs, TI has a bunch of stuff throughout the range.
Yeah, ESP32 is a microcontroller in that it doesn't run a Linux kernel. It's more similar to an Arduino, and they're good for dedicated applications like running a remote data collection with a LoRa, radio link back to a central point or receiver. But most of our folks typically at least run full kernels, whether they're Unix or Linux.
Yes, and a Raspberry Pi will run a seriously pared down Linux. So they, instead of running
a Raspberry Pi runs a full Linux built for ARM.
It can, but you can also, right? If it's you can. There's other things other than glibc. There's some things that replace glibc that are a little lighter. The other day I seen a presentation on a Linux operating system called Void Linux, but they still had a Void Linux with a extra lighter or more static libraries called Muzzle or something.
Yeah, I mean there's thousands of tools like that out there to build dedicated appliances, but if I've got a Raspberry Pi, I run standard Linux on it. I got a dozen of them in the rack back there, email servers, name servers.
Yeah, I have a couple Pis, and the thing that I've run recently within the last 2 years to play around with was home automation. And yeah, it's a full Linux.
That's what I say. They're more for dedicated application purpose built. Pis, on the other hand, I've got 6 Pi 4s here sitting on a shelf to build a Kubernetes cluster. If I ever find the time to do it, might do a presentation on it.
But it's still open source software. It's on the fringe of regular Linux stuff, but it isn't desktop or server based Linux or whatever. But it's very tech. I mean,
which is a great thing to know about. You know, like you said, it's not what you normally have on your desktop at home or even the server at work, but it makes the world run. It's a good thing to know about.
Yep.
I
sure
seen, well, he passed away. He was another friend of mine a couple of years ago. He was heavily into the ones that were called Odroids.
Yep.
Well, a lot of this stuff
Yep.
is China made. And he was interested in having a SATA controller on it. And he had in his little briefcase, basically a SAN, storage accessible.
Probably a NAS, network attached storage.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. But it was based on Odroids, not.
Yeah, Odroid is, I've got an Odroid HU4 and have stared at multiple. They're an ARM-based microcontroller, very much so like the Pi, but they target a little bit different market. They also had some that I was very interested in, but never purchased, wherein it was a modified Odroid XU4 that had a SATA controller and a couple of different mounts. So it would either dock directly with a 3.5-inch drive or a 2.5-inch drive. And I thought that was phenomenal. Like if you wanted to do SAN or even NAS, where you could send traffic and have a smart controller per drive, and then do your logical file system in some way across them, and you had direct network access to every single drive. Hard Kernel is the company I purchased things from in the US. I believe Odroid is based in Europe somewhere. And I think they called it the Cloud Shell. It's a little like 2-inch by 3-inch, I want to say OLED display, has a SATA controller meant to drive an SSD, and nice little laser cut case to put the thing in that makes it like 3 inches tall by 5 inches wide by 7 inches long. And it is a whatever you want the little Linux system to be. I'm thinking about using it for GPS time synchronization.
So,
I
now,
think
some of the Linux groups are still existing as, even though people are getting back together, and it's allowed groups across the country to act as though they're local lugs. And main reasons, there's some of the stuff I'm interested in. I'm also a ham radio guy. I did attend one of your Unix users thing about a month before last, so I've been attending a couple things of your group. So
Great. We've got a couple of people with ham backgrounds and have in the past. So even had a few presentations from some hams over the years. And yeah.
I have been interested in Packet, but I never did anything, and my license is current. I just need to update the address since I moved.
you say your license is or is not current?
It is current. It just has my old address, so I have to add /mobile when I call out, or I need to update it. I just haven't.
Yeah, all the stuff at the FCC has all been changed in the last 5 years. You always had a URL, or they got a universal number, and then because I also have a GMRS license, I paid for that, which is no test, but that's becoming popular in the Florida area. A lot of hams also carry those radios too, because if they got family relatives, the GMRS license is by household, not by individual user. You still have a call sign, but one license covers mom, dad, sister, brother, whatever.
It's more identifying the location. What capabilities does GMRS, which I think is General Mobile Radio Service versus FMRS Family Mobile Radio Service, I want to say, what's the benefit of GMRS over FMRS?
Okay. FRS is extremely limited in the fact that what you buy in that shrink wrap package can't be changed.
Right.
Power limited because it has an attached antenna and cannot be removed. In other words, its power is limited by, what came out of the package.
Right.
EMRS radio is like a 2 meter, 70 centimeter amateur radio. In fact, it's GMRS is much fewer frequencies. They're channelized, right? Hard channelized. They do have the concept of a repeater, but the antenna is removable. So you could do a mag mount on top of your car and you would get more gain, even though you're carrying a handheld in the car. And there are mobile GMRS radios, just more power, more
Okay.
ability to improve its transmitting capabilities with antennas. And the power range is similar to ham. Ham does have an upper limit. I mean, if you're doing experimental stuff, weak signal, long distance stuff, high gain antennas, amateur radio at the end gives you more stuff, whatever, but there's 3 levels of testing. There is a much steeper learning curve to get into all the things you can do. And there's a whole lot of things you can do that the other radio services.
Right.
Still around, right? That
Absolutely understood ham versus the other, but I wasn't clear on FMRS versus GMRS.
they're very limited, short range, cheap, because you buy them in packs of 3 or 5, right?
Yeah.
FRS. And just for hanging around the yard with the kids, they're better than whatever you bought from Radio Shack 25 years ago, that Space Patrol thing, which I did have one. It was about the first radio toy that I had. FRS is better than that. It's FM. It's clear. And they use it on Disney all the time. People come in as travelers and
Yeah. I have an unhealthy interest in Usenet and the likes, and that bridges, I want to bridge things both literally and figuratively to packet, but especially contemporary, you get into encryption you can't have and various other things that make what I might do with packet nebulous and somewhat of a non-starter.
yes, by strict code, there is no such thing. Everything is encrypted. It's digital. But what they're talking about in amateur radio is you can't conceal the purpose of the communication. When they say crypt, it means like spy encoding, encrypt, not digital formats.
Well, encoding and encrypting are 2 very different things.
Correct. But you could do, if you're simply talking about compressing, right, which would make it non-clear for a radio that didn't do compression. But if the compression protocol was known, you're not obscuring the meaning. Somebody would just have to build a compressor, uncompress it.
To me, compression is a form of encoding.
Yes, but we're talking about obscuring the meaning of the transmission. You want a private phone call that nobody can then over listen through, some secure set of keys. That would not be legal on amateur radio. Somebody has to have the standard, even if they got to build it to monitor what you are.
Right. And I was also thinking like SSH over packet is verboten.
Yes, because somebody else wouldn't have the private or public private key, and then that would be obscured, not to be monitored if somebody wanted to.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Usenet, right?
Yes.
I played with Usenet a long time ago. I thought BBSs were more dead. Synchronet and FidoNet and some spin-offs using the same protocol as FidoNet is actually quite active. They're not using modems. They use a serial to packet shim or something, right? And there's all sorts of BBSs, especially Synchronet. That's the BBS program. They still have doors, right? If you're back to the BBS days, and they still upload. Because what I was interested in is not net news, but netmail and rhyme, which is gone, but Fido's there, and protocols that use rhyme, though they don't use the 4-number zone stuff. But there are BBS message formats that are broadcast across different sets of BBSs.
Yeah, there are multiple Fido technology networks in existence, both using actual analog modem, emulated analog or emulated modem, as in device pretends to be a modem and sends IP packets, and then there's actual IP interface directly into some BBS software. But no, I said Usenet, and I run multiple actual Usenet servers, not BBSs. I've not looked recently since Google backed away from Usenet, but prior to Google backing away, I was routinely seeing 50 megabyte of text articles a day.
Yeah, there's 2 services online that still you can buy a large quantity of data on an anniversary date, and it would be more Usenet than I'd read in a year. And they carry a Thunder News or something, I think was something I bought on, the day after Thanksgiving. Some stuff goes on sale.
Yeah. There's multiple commercial providers. There's multiple free text providers. And there's actually a surprising number of people that run their own server.
So my question to you then is, when was the last time the source code for the CNews program, right, that ran on the server that did the, Fido network, it's tossing. It debundled because in between 94 to 2001, I ran a SCO Xenix system. They carried a very limited Usenet feed on rec amateur radio stuff and ComSci and some electronic, not the whole feed, not all of the top stuff.
Few news groups.
But I ran CNews because I was able to, through a BBS, or we're talking CompuServe Genie days, came up with the code, got it to compile on Xenix, and then ran it for about a decade and had some just local guys call in. In fact, it was up to 63 guys, like in 95, 96, in the greater Orlando area that had personal machines and an extra phone line. And we ran UUCP in, connections in between us, and we transferred email for the hobby. Because we're just on the verge of commercially available for non-universities to sign up for an account for $10 a month and actually be on the real internet.
I haven't seen much activity with CNews, but the Internet News daemon, or INN, is what I run and have run on and off for the last 15 years. There's still people running Diablo on Windows. There's 2 or 3 other names that I'm forgetting at the moment that are still hobbyists using it. There are even some, I don't think it's Synchronet. No.
Yeah, I've seen a Synchronet that also carried some net news. They got a door to tack it on.
Synchronet today is not Synchronet from 90s.
Okay.
Synchronet from 90s was its own code from the ground up. Synchronet today is like functionality, but using open source components.
Yeah, I actually looked I built it. I built it on my Linode server, and then didn't open the port up to the world, but it actually is mostly C code, not JavaScript or something. And I got it to go. It took 2 days, but I finally figured out exactly which questions I was answering wrong and got a clean build. and brought up my own node to log in and prove that it worked. But until I actually want to start carrying one of them alternate feeds and have a reason to do so too, I won't open the port or make it available. There's enough remote systems I can log into to get that fixed. I don't need to be my own.
Are multiple boards that are participating in multiple networks, and some of them are FTNs. There's also some non-FTN. It's like another brand board had a different protocol that was not FTN compatible, but it's functionally the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still a thing.
The internet lets us do a lot of fringe hobbies, including retro computing. I'd still like to fire up my original Model 4, hoping not all the caps went up in flames the first time I powered on.
Unix users group.
All right. Well, my mouth is very dry at this point. It's been a good conversation, but I believe I need to bow out for the evening.
Once again, I agree. This has really been a great presentation tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you both to our two presenters and also to the participants. You all brought a lot of good questions and comments, and it really made the evening enjoyable. I do have a couple of quick questions. Grant, if you need to get off, you're more than welcome to. These are directed at some of the other folks.
Yeah, thanks, bud. Okay, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Grant. RS and Nick, RS, just if you'd like us to, I mean, if you want to keep your anonymity, that's fine. But if you want us to have a little more clue of who you might be, yeah, give us what the rest of your initials are. Nick, I don't know if you're the Nick that I know or who knows me. But again, if you want to put a back initial or tell us the rest of your name, that'd be wonderful. At least I'll know if it's the Nick I know or the Nick who knows me. So, and if any of you, obviously, David was from Orlando, and I'm just curious if we have other people from out of town who are still with us here. That could be Nick, it could be RS. Bruce, I think you've been at the meetings before. I don't remember if you're in the area or if you're an out-of-towner. Wendell, I'm not sure if you're the Wendell I know.
Yes, I'm the same one.
Winston-Salem, okay. Great, thank you. Nick, RS, Bruce, you want to volunteer where you're from? Oh, okay. Like I said, we're just curious, find out where we get people and how they enjoy it. So, but once again, thank you all very much for coming. Anybody else have any closing thoughts for tonight? And if not, we'll turn off the recorder. Okay, this is the bookend for the recording. This is Wednesday, July the 10th, 2024. This was the monthly St. Louis Linux Unix users group meeting, SLUUG. You can go to slug.org for our main website, and that'll lead you to the archives and maybe some other information. There's also the slug.org/calendar, where we record all kinds of meetings that are held either here in town or around the world. So let's see, our next meeting is next Thursday. It's Craig Buchek, frequent speaker of ours. He's going to do a talk on architecture, big and small, comparing how computer architecture evolved to emulate building architecture. Should be an interesting talk. And with that, once again, big thanks to Lee Lammert and Grant Taylor, who did a wonderful job putting things together tonight. Thank you all, and good evening.